So my very first job in the field was actually at the Berlin company where I was working for, it's mostly statistical or data science consulting kind of work. I got that position by just cold emailing everyone that I could in the Berlin area who I thought could maybe give me a job. So
Nice.
yeah,
That's amazing.
I just sent 30, 40 emails to obviously statistical or data science related places, but also just anywhere that could conceivably have a data science team. If I could find a person who said they were a data scientist on LinkedIn, for example, and I just sent a bunch of cold messages with my resume like, hey, I'm studying data science. I barely speak German. Do you want to give me an internship? And, everybody ignored me except for one.
On the podcast today, we have Marina Wyss. She's a machine learning applied scientist at Twitch and was previously at Coursera. In this episode, we talked about how Marina transitioned from political science and jewelry management into data science and ML, her self-study roadmap from free courses to Coursera to deep technical books, practical frameworks for self-learning, getting promotions, and breaking into the ML industry. Why she rejects hustle culture in favor of a gratitude-driven approach to productivity. Be sure to subscribe to Data Neighbor in your favorite podcast app and YouTube. Let's dive into our conversation with Marina Wyss.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Data Neighbors podcast with Hi, Stravya and Sean. In today's podcast, though, you have me, Stravya, and Sean chatting with Marina Wyss. She is doing machine learning at Twitch, which is, I think, Amazon, one of the Amazon's products. And she also blogs about machine learning and applied science. And she also has a wonderful YouTube channel where she shares all these great things about how to get into machine learning and all these wonderful details. Thank you so much, Marina, for joining us. Very excited about today's podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome to the show, Marina.
Awesome. One question, Marina, before we dive into the details, right? So your YouTube channel is called Marina Gratitude Driven. I'd love to know some story about the naming there.
Yeah. So one of the main focuses of my channel is, in addition to kind of the technical side on data science and machine learning, is a little bit about productivity and how you can really do your best in a field that is extremely difficult at times, and then also just kind of in life. And so for me, the gratitude-driven thing is kind of an alternative to hustle culture. So there's also, a lot of people in the productivity space are very like, you got to go, 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 grind, grind, grind. And that has never really resonated with me. So for me, it's more about feeling really excited that I get to work on all of these things and I have all of these opportunities and I really want to make the most of that, like for myself and for, anyone I can help with my work or my YouTube or my family or whatever the case may be. So it's really just motivating yourself from a place of being grateful for all the opportunities that we have.
Just love that, Marina. I mean, it's, to be honest, less talked about in tech, right? The holistic perspective of looking at things and how important it is to not just, just be in the grind culture, but also actually have fun as part of it.
Yeah.
Maybe you end up even working a longer time, but
Maybe,
probably end up having fun as part of it, which is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that story right there. I think you touched upon it a bit, but probably just starting from the basic, would love to know where your journey started. You have some really cool background, right? Political science, non-tech to tech, and not just Yeah. And not just any tech, right? And you're also into the cutting edge now, machine learning and everything related to it. So would love to understand where did this whole thing start?
Yeah. I definitely have had kind of a winding path. So I studied political science in undergrad, and I spent a few years after that working on political campaigns and for nonprofits. I got kind of burned out working in politics, and so I had the opportunity to run a small jewelry company for 4 years. So I was just doing small business management. It was a super tiny company, just me and the owner, so there was no way that I could advance. That was it. There's no promotion, and there's 2 people. So at one point, I needed to do something else. I didn't know what I wanted to do at all. So I was like, I guess I'll go for a master's in the same thing I studied before, right? I'll do public policy and maybe end up in public policy research. That was my thinking. And it was kind of by accident that I discovered data science and coding and machine learning because I just happened to find a program that wasn't even deliberate that had a really strong data science component to the public policy masters. So the coursework was a lot of coding, statistics, causal inference. I even took some machine learning and deep learning and NLP courses. And it was really just over time became apparent to me that was where my focus area should be. It was what I really enjoyed doing. And so I ended up even though my master's is in public policy, it really was more of a social data science program in the end. And so I took that and then ended up working at a statistical consulting firm in Berlin for about a year. And after that, somehow managed to get a machine learning position at Coursera. So that was my first kind of jump into big tech, or medium-sized tech, I guess. And then spent 2 years there and ultimately was able to transition to Twitch or Amazon a few years after that. So that was basically the path. There was a lot of self-study along the way.
Yeah.
For sure, because the public policy master's was a good foundation in kind of coding, machine learning, statistics, but nothing in terms of applied ML, nothing in terms of like deployment, building production systems, any of that. So all that had to happen in addition to my full-time work, which is kind of how I got good at productivity stuff.
Man, that's so funny. I did undergrad in international studies, and then I did master's in public policy.
Nice. Thinking of the same thing.
Yeah, and then there was like a data track, and I wasn't even taking it, but like 2 of my buddies were taking it, and I was just like, "What classes were you taking next semester?" And it was like none of the stuff I was taking, and I was like, "Man," and I was like, "I'm gonna take some stuff with you guys, so I'll try some of the data stuff." And I was like, "Oh, this is really interesting," and then it just puts you on a completely different trajectory.
Yep,
but
totally.
yeah,
That's awesome.
I was thinking of doing like USAID or something, which I guess kind of a good thing I can't do it because I don't know if I have a different job right now, unfortunately. But sadly, but it's just interesting how things can take you different directions. I feel like public policy. Yeah, there wasn't same thing. There wasn't like a data program thing where I was either. It's just, but it really does make sense to have like that track in that field.
It does for sure.
That's awesome. Like, look at both of you, learn public policy and you're doing applied science, and Sean, you're like a principal data scientist now, totally in tech and all of that. It's pretty awesome. So Marina, I heard you talk about self-study a bunch, right? So like, how was it? Like, was it straightforward? I bet it's not, especially so many things out there. How was it? What made you choose to go after a certain resource versus the other? Just would love to understand your self-study process there.
Yeah. So at first, it was kind of something that I was doing to supplement my master's program, because I knew from just like life experience that usually academia doesn't really prepare you for what you need on the job. And that was luckily an intuition that I had before I needed to be applying. So that was nice. So I knew I needed to like learn SQL, for example. That didn't come up at all in my master's program.
Yeah.
And I don't remember at the beginning having a very strong intuition for what the best resources were. So I was mostly going based on reviews, or I would try something out and see if it worked for me. And if it didn't, I would find something else. There's a lot of free resources, so it's usually not usually a big investment. I didn't do any boot camps or anything that would have been like a bigger financial investment at the time. So yeah, at the first it was really just exploratory. Once I started at Coursera, one of the best perks of Coursera is you get free Coursera, not only while you work there, but actually forever. So I still get free Coursera courses, which is awesome.
I didn't know about the forever thing about Coursera.
Yeah, it's great.
That's just amazing.
Yep. I mean, you can always audit them for free, but if you want the certification, that's free for alumni, which is really cool. And as we all know, many of the most recommended machine learning and deep learning courses are on Coursera, like the deeplearning.ai or Andrew Ng's courses. And so those were really, really helpful for me at the beginning of my career. So I think during my time at Coursera, I blew through 20 courses or something. I was just constantly working through them. And then after that, I think my focus has primarily been on books, and that's just kind of personal preference. There's just so many good technical books nowadays. And I really just, for some reason, I'm kind of drawn to reading as a way of learning rather than necessarily working through courses. Of course, supplemented with projects. So reading is all good and stuff, but you got to, of course, apply what you're actually learning as you go.
Was the culture at Coursera, was there a big emphasis on people working there, like learning and taking time to do courses? I guess my question is that something you kind of took on yourself, or was there also emphasis from the company to hey, everyone here should be learning since it's a product we're building?
I think it was lightly encouraged. It was definitely, everyone would occasionally talk about I'm taking this course, which would you recommend for this? But
cool.
It wasn't a requirement or anything. I think it was more self-motivated for me because I I knew there was a gap between where I was and where I needed to be professionally at the very beginning. I was hired as a junior, so the expectations were not high. It was definitely okay for me to still be learning, but I could clearly see a difference between my skill level when I first started and the skill level that I wanted to get to. And so there was a lot of self-motivated. I mean, it was like gentle pressure, right? Like I knew what I needed to learn, and I kind of had some goals in terms of how fast I wanted to get promoted, for example, and so I was kind of working backwards from that. So more of that, but yeah, people definitely do take courses there.
Nice. Yeah. I just think it's nice when companies like make space for
Yeah.
like proper learning and development, because it's just so easy to get wrapped up into the regular day to day, like I gotta get this thing done, and then and just reserving that chunk of time to be like, okay, I'm gonna like take some time and actually learn something new.
Yeah, definitely.
I've also heard this somewhere and it stuck with me, is that generally at the start of the year or somewhere in the year, people have vacation time locked in, right? Or vacation budget, that this is the amount of time I'm going to go on vacation. These are the places I want to go at. This is the amount of money I'd spend. They were talking about thinking with a similar framework for learning as well. This is the amount of learning I'd do. This is the amount of money I'd spend on it if you have any that, that you could afford. And these are the skills that I'm going to improve upon. Ensuring that we continue, investing time and energy into just upskilling ourselves is literally what is going to make us still have some value in this current AI world even more, right?
For sure. Definitely.
So one question, Marina, I know we jumped into after joining Coursera what you did, right? But what helped you land your first job? Like I've heard you talk about, I think in one of your videos where you said you've applied for 50 companies?
Way more
100?
than that. Yeah.
100, probably interview. I heard the numbers are pretty big and would love to know that journey. How did you land from public policy and, even a bachelor's of non-tech to some extent?
Yep.
And end up, yeah.
Yeah, so my very first job in the field was actually at the Berlin company where I was working for, it's mostly statistical or data science consulting kind of work. And that one actually has an interesting, to me, story as well. I got that position by just cold emailing everyone that I could in the Berlin area who I thought could maybe give me a job. So
nice.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I just sent 30, 40 emails to obviously statistical or data science related places, but also just anywhere that could conceivably have a data science team. If I could find a person who said they were a data scientist on LinkedIn, for example, and I just sent a bunch of cold messages with my resume like, hey, I'm studying data science. I barely speak German. Do you want to give me an internship? And, everybody ignored me except for one. And that one brought me in for an interview. And then I guess I did well enough that they made an internship position, which was really cool.
That's really cool.
They didn't have anything, but they were like, I don't know, it's cheap to hire students in Berlin. They do actually pay you for internships there, which is cool, but it's not a big expense for them. So yeah, I guess they saw some potential, which was nice. And so they made that position for me. I stayed with them as an intern for about a year, and then they transitioned my role into a junior data scientist position after that. So that was really just I put myself out there and it happened to work out. So that was cool.
No, I mean, you put yourself out there, but also did work hard, right? So I hear this. I think we touched a little bit about this in our one of the first few podcasts, if you remember, Sean. There's something called growth surface area. What is it? Luck surface area, right? So it's almost like you manufacture luck too, because we keep saying that it's destiny, it's luck. And for people who they might think it's basically just leave it. But no, we could do a lot of things. You worked hard, that you literally take the first opportunity you got, and you've successfully went through that, right? So that, and also cold emailing. If you probably don't email and say that I just applied, I'm waiting, then that itself is also not going to improve your luck surface area. So yeah, that's very interesting that you got where you got because of that. You basically, what type of self-study did you do? Was it courses back then as well? SQL and other things?
Yep. Yeah, lots of Udemy, Data Camp, Free Code Academy or whatever. All those kind of bounced around from many different course providers depending on what I needed.
You mentioned I'd love to know more about kind of your process or framework when you mentioned okay, I had an idea of my timeline for promotion, and I worked backwards from that, because I've seen people make this mistake, and I've made this mistake in multiple jobs where I'm more like working hard, and then I'm like promotions are coming around and I'm like, people gave me good feedback, like it's all good, like why didn't I get the promotion? So it sounds like you were really like thoughtful about like what you need to do to get there.
Tried to be. I think their promotions, while there's obviously an element that's outside of your control, there is a lot that you can do to influence it. And being aware of what the criteria are at each level and being really proactive about talking to your manager about where you are not hitting those criteria can make a really big difference, in my experience at least. And worst case, you're getting consistent feedback. So if you're consistently bringing up promotion, even if you're not like, hey, it's time to promote me, but more, where am I on this path? That can be helpful for directing your focus so that you're actually working on the right things to get to that next step. And more often than not, I've found that it can be things that I wouldn't have even thought about. It's, often not even your technical skills and more like, hey, I need you to show that you've moved this business metric, or you need to have done some cross-functional thing that proves this skill, or whatever the case may be. So that's, having external kind of feedback can help shape that path as well.
Awesome. So what was the hardest thing, Marina, in yours? We are jumping between corporate life and actual study and, self-study and getting into. So now jumping into that self-study thing a bit too. So would want to understand how, like, let's say if someone's starting out, right? Probably a non-tech background and whatever. So it's overwhelming out there, the number of things that you could do today. I know they could come to your channel and they could come to our podcast channel and learn a bit, but let's say there are tons of things that they could learn things from. Like what is your general, like when people come to you for coaching or whatever, like how do you tell them to go about learning or doing the self-study?
Yeah. Essentially, how do you kind of pick out from amongst all the noise what you should actually be focusing on and in what order?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's super hard. These fields are huge and there's an infinite number of things you could be learning at any one time. And I think most of them would be valuable, but we kind of need to pick the highest leverage ones. So if someone is just starting out, I would say they should try to find the fundamentals that are going to be, useful to build on throughout every stage. So if you have no background at all, maybe we start with Python and statistics, like, starting with like just building blocks that you can use from there. And we don't need to worry about tools. Like, and this comes up all the time. Like, should I learn PySpark? Should I learn whatever? And like, or Airflow? And I'm like, not yet. Like, this doesn't matter right now. We're just going to learn the theory that we can use to build from there. So I would say like kind of the boring stuff at first. And then once you've gotten to the point where the fundamentals are there, then I would honestly just talk to people. So people who are already in the field, ideally, and this can be helpful whether you know exactly what position you want or you don't, because if you don't know what you want, then you could, ideally, you talk to a ton of different people. Maybe you're interested in analytics and software engineering and data science and machine learning, and you could talk to all of them about their positions, and then hopefully that would help you narrow down your focus. And as you go, you can also ask them like what they actually need in their job, because I think that's a big mistake I made at the beginning. Was I would just kind of hear a tool and then I would try to learn that tool, and I didn't even know if it would be required on the job, and I haven't actually used it. So if I had spent more time talking to people, then I might have learned which tools were the ones that they're actually using in their day-to-day. And I think that's especially important now in kind of like our even faster tech environment with all the AI tools. It's really easy to be like, oh, now I need to learn agents. Oh, now I need to learn LangChain. Now I need to learn this. How many of these tools are we actually using on our day-to-day really depends on the role. So that can help you kind of narrow your focus. Plus you're networking. So that's also good.
Have you seen like with AI, have you seen like your approach to learning or what you should think about like in the early stages after you kind of get some of those basics change recently, or or do you find there's things that are still like you should always have focus on these no matter what?
Also, another question, slightly related, even if it's not going to like things that didn't change, how can you leverage AI today for self-study as well?
Yeah. So I think on the first question, I was actually just talking to a mentee about this today. So that's interesting.
Cool.
Nice.
I think the fundamentals are still the same, because even though we have Replit and Cursor and whatever, we have our coding agents, they're really good. Right? That's undeniable, but they're not perfect. And I've been using these tools a lot recently. I've just been doing some personal projects and they make crazy mistakes still.
Yeah.
And so if I didn't have the fundamentals, I wouldn't know, especially if you're working with a fully like agentic workflow where it's in YOLO mode and it's just kind of like, not asking your permission, it just will it'll delete tests and be like, perfect, they're passing, or it'll do things that are really inefficient or whatever the case may be. So I think it's still very important to have those fundamentals, just basic coding stuff. Maybe rather than focusing on syntax the way that we used to have to learn that, maybe now you learn more about security and scalability and things that you need to watch the agent do so that it doesn't misbehave. So perhaps maybe your focus is a little different, but I think the core tools are probably the same. Same with statistics. It's still going to be core. No matter what, you're still going to need to understand these things. So foundations, I think, are the same. In terms of using AI as a learning partner or as a tool, I think it can be really helpful for coming up with roadmaps. So if you're overwhelmed and you're like, hey, I need to learn Python, please give me 3 courses that will help take me from beginner to advanced, and then maybe help me brainstorm some projects I can do after that. This kind of using it in that way can be really helpful. And I've also personally, I've used ChatGPT as a study buddy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Refreshing math for a course I was taking, and I was having it give me some calculus problem, and then I would try to answer it and it would be like, you got this wrong and here's why, and then it would ask me more questions to kind of shore up whatever I was struggling with. So I think those would be the 2 that come to mind right away.
That's awesome. Do people also use it can we use it, do you think, have some signal in the noise because of so many things that are out there? Can we use it to help teach us too, or probably provide resources with deep research now? Maybe. I didn't try that actually.
Resources for sure. I definitely think that you could get a pretty decent learning roadmap, along with links for stuff that's highly rated or comes up a lot in Reddit forums or whatever, stuff people are recommending. That for sure, I think it would be pretty reliable for.
Yeah, and I like it for whoever you're saying with the study buddy. I also just like it for explaining things to me.
Yep,
and
totally.
A different concept where it's even if I'm reading something somewhere else, copying and pasting, you'd be like, can you explain this line by line, in a layman's term, or I'm a data scientist, I'm not an engineer, I don't know that background. I find it really helpful.
Yep, and that reminds me, I also really like it for explaining formulas, math formulas. It's never been my strong suit. I usually have to go through and write it out in human words. And so that can be a really
super smart
thing for me. You can also use it to help quiz you. So if you just read something and you upload it and you're like, hey, can you ask me questions about this to kind of test your recall? That could also maybe be useful.
So how long till AI replaces us?
It's a great question. I think about this every single day. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of thoughts on this. It's something I think about literally every day. And there are really, really smart people on all sides of this debate. So there's people who are like, next year, jobs are gone. And then there's people who are like, in 100 years, we might have to think about some changes. And so probably the answer is somewhere in the middle, you would assume. So I don't think it's going to be next year, but who knows?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's definitely something that I think about too, where I'm just I just need to kind of leverage it as much as I can to the stuff you do with be more productive in some sense the way. And at least, worst case scenario, it's a pretty interesting tool that I know how to use now. And whereas the worst case scenario of not leveraging it is shoot, I just got my job taken.
I wonder what will ChatGPT say are you going to replace her or us, or will AI replace us? What does it think?
I haven't asked it that specifically, but I have asked kind of similar questions to kind of get at its vibe. And the thing is, it has the RLHF layer, so you never know what the actual underlying model believes. But what it tells you is usually very nice. It usually tells you something about of course not, I'm going to be your partner, and then humans will get to focus on whatever, so.
I wonder if OpenAI actually, ensures that this type of questions get the right answers.
I'm sure.
Right? Sort of FAQ that these could get media attention very easily.
Yeah,
I can imagine. Yeah. Awesome. This is great. So I heard you talk about starting at the basics, right? When we spoke about self-study, Python and statistics, right? So once we go from there, how do we know we got good at it? Basically work with AI to quiz you maybe, right? Or go online, have bunch. So any ideas there to move on from that level to the next level?
Yeah. So I think courses are really great at the very, very beginning. And then as soon as you can, you should get into projects. So I think you kind of learn where you are based on what you get stuck on. So maybe you can make the first 2 steps of your 10-step project, and then you need to learn about step number 3 and number 4. And I think that's ultimately how I would recommend anybody learn any technical thing is like, learn enough to kind of get your footing and then just start building. And as you go, learn the next thing you need. And that can also help avoid this overwhelm, so you're just like, I'm building this app. I've got these 2 components. Now I need to learn how to add like accounts or authorization or payments or whatever the case, where now I need to integrate with an API. Now I need to make the back end a certain way, whatever the case may be for your particular project. And then just learn about that thing. And that way your skills kind of keep growing over time without it getting overwhelming. And you hopefully never hit a ceiling because you keep making more advanced projects.
Awesome. So what do you think someone could do at the start? Like Kaggle has a bunch of data sets and people could go do that. I mean, with Cursor and other things, we actually have a podcast where we built an analytics app out of it. Like, you could do stuff like that too. But anything that you think like people who want to get into like data science or ML could start doing, what could be a good set of first few projects? They learn Python, they learn stats. Let's just say they're there. What could be the first set of projects that they could start looking into?
Yeah, so I think for your very first project, something like Kaggle is fine. But once you're past like complete beginner stage, I think it's time to start getting more real world data. And so the way I always recommend thinking about projects is think about something in your actual life that you would like to solve or you're curious about.
Yeah.
So like, I really like fitness stuff. I would have a great time making an app that maybe uses like data from my smartwatch, or maybe makes a meal plan recommender based on my macros or whatever. Something I'm actually interested in.
Yeah.
First of all, it's way more fun. Second of all, you have to find your own data or, synthesize data or something. And then you also are the subject matter expert, so you know if it's working or not. You can tell if it's good. So I don't really like to prescribe projects. I think it's really part of it is your creativity of coming up with a project and then actually implementing it end to end. Like that is the thing that's impressive when you're in an interview or like on a resume, is if I can see that you really built this thing from beginning to end and you didn't have your hand held and you had to kind of figure out the tricky parts on your own. I think that's the most valuable. So
yeah, I think doing something that you'll actually use is so important, because even in the real world, when you're building products, like at the end of the day, you're building them to provide some value to a user. And if you're with these like kind of like external projects like on Kaggle and stuff, like you're not going to be able to talk to the users, but do something that you actually want for yourself. And you're like, okay, I know how to actually iterate on this. I keep thinking about making this one for like making better routes for me to run around Tahoe, just because some of the stuff like Strava doesn't quite do it. Yeah, I think once if I got into that, I'd probably just be like going deep on iterating stuff every time I see.
Yep. And best case scenario, if one of your projects goes really well, you could also like potentially turn it into a little business or something. If you were, if someone's interested in that, like if you make something really good, you could put it on the App Store, put some ads, make a little side hustle or something. And that also makes your your project that much more valuable, because you actually built something that you get kind of like a user feedback loop, and you can see how it works in production, and then you have to learn about all the production scaling stuff. So, there's infinite ceilings for self-motivated projects.
Yeah, and I actually found that like even messing around with something like Replit is really nice for learning for that reason too, where it's like even when it's going off the rails and doing something on my side project, it is interesting where I'm like, why are you creating these different directories? Like, how does that work? Like, because usually when I'm doing data science work, historically, I'm like, I know how to do the pipeline, but at the end of the day, I'm doing a lot of the stuff in like a Jupyter notebook. And so it's kind of cool to see how you actually do set it up in terms of an app environment, things I haven't really done before.
Totally. I asked ChatGPT something, and let's see if I can share my screen. Look at this. AI. Hey, Chad, will AI replace data scientists? Short answer, AI won't replace data scientists, but data scientists who use AI will replace those who don't. So I actually doubt.
They're trying to get more users.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. And this is something that everyone's saying on the internet. Now, I doubt everyone's saying on the internet because ChatGPT started saying it, or ChatGPT is saying this now because everyone starts saying this on the internet.
Hard to say.
So it's a very common answer, I guess, that I got. Cool. So, Marina, when you said people need to go build something on their own, I absolutely agree with that. Probably because you would face a lot of challenges, because especially if you are starting for the first time, and the only thing that will keep you in it is because you like what you're doing, right? If you probably are solving a problem that you don't like, then you wouldn't know, what to do. So building something that you probably feel very passionate about is so important. So do you think even if people want to get into applied science or something that's related to ML, just building something like actual engineering would also be helpful, because that would need a different skill set, right? I mean, yeah, you learn Python, you learn coding, but do you think that's important?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that any of these projects could be applied ML projects. Maybe you start small, you start in a little notebook, and then you ultimately decide, I want to actually serve real users. Okay, so how am I going to do that? Maybe I'm going to use SageMaker. Maybe I'm going to deploy a little Optiversal, whatever the case may be, with Docker or something. So yeah, you can definitely make it an end-to-end machine learning project. And if you're interested in machine learning, I would definitely recommend doing exactly that. That would be how I would recommend somebody who's just getting started kind of demonstrate skills before you have professional experience.
Makes sense. And also, if you want to, get a paid job, even an internship, you basically have that as part of your resume, saying beyond Kaggle and beyond this thing, something you did for your own, and you did something, then you definitely have a way better chance to getting into it versus the others, for sure. So basically, if we start from the get-go, people, if you're new to this space entirely, start with Python, learn about statistics, and start building something. Could be as simple as Kaggle to start with if you don't know any details about things. And as soon as you think you have some idea, then pick an area that you're passionate about, start building it. You're going to hit a roadblock, obviously, because you don't know everything. So as soon as you hit a roadblock, you go learn more about it through a course, through online, and then go complete that step. Then again, you hit a roadblock. So learn something about it.
Exactly.
And then, so this basically helps you finish the end product end to end. And you'd basically learn not just the concept, but how to use it. What are some constraints? How do you come back? So probably you would answer all the interview questions as part of it, right? Because the questions are going to be about the edge cases.
That's
and
true.
you probably have gone through the edge cases yourself. And that itself is definitely going to help you through the process of hiring.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if it feels overwhelming to come up with your own projects, this is another great use of just ChatGPT. So if you have a general idea, you can tell it hey, suggest me a project plan for the simplest version of this. Okay, what are we missing? And, it can definitely be, I think a lot of times when people hear do your own projects, they're okay, but I don't know how to do anything. So that's really scary.
I know.
But at this point, we have the tools to kind of help guide you. Just, as long as you make sure to still use enough of your own decision making as you go, and make sure to learn about these things in a little bit more depth rather than just accepting it at face value, because that's also a learning opportunity. Yeah, it's definitely helpful.
So when people, Sean, do you want to ask something?
I was just going to say it's hard to think of the first project or two, but then once I started a project or two, my side ones, I'll be in it and
Yep.
I have an idea for another one. And then you get this big long list and then you're like, oh, do I stop doing this one and do the other one?
Story of my
life. That's another problem.
Yeah. Then it's too many.
So I want to ask you both, because you mentioned that too, Sean. I have some of my answers too. Let's say you hit something and you are facing an issue. You don't quite understand the error. You don't know what to do. What's one place that do you go on Reddit? Now we have ChatGPT to help work with. How do you go, get yourself when you're stuck somewhere and you don't see you're in this endless loop of trying to figure out, but do you have a community that you go to, anything, any tips there?
Yeah, these days I would always just use ChatGPT or whatever.
That's
if you're
true.
using an AI agent, just for efficiency's sake. But if you want to make sure you're actually learning, you can always have it explain to you why. What was it about this error that explained to you where to find the issue? So you can definitely still use it a little bit more proactively, but that's just going to be your fastest method to the answer.
Yeah, I kind of I'll get in a workflow if I'm in Coursera or Replit. And then I'll also have, if I'm at work, I use Gemini, and if on my own stuff, I use ChatGPT, and I get the Replit response error. and I'll be like, tell me what happened here. And then I'll paste it into ChatGPT and be like,
Yep.
the dev says this. Like, what does it mean? Like, respond to it to ask it more. And then I just like have them talk to each other.
Yeah.
And then I'm just like reading. And then, yeah, I guess the other thing
That's an agent idea right there, Sean.
Yeah. Yeah. I have found something that's nice too is like in Replit or Cursor, if you're doing the agentic stuff, to also just be like, what's the best way for me to give you a request where I can get like the best output from you? And usually it's always like the same thing. They're like, oh, break it up and create little tickets and give me some checks. But yeah, I think just like having me not writing the prompts directly, but having another formulate a better prompt than I can helps a lot. Even for asking like what went wrong.
Yep, makes sense.
I also feel a big part of this entire getting the first project in or the first thing in, I think is all about a little, I don't know, a mental barrier. Like, I don't know anything, or I'm not I don't know if I can do it. These people studied this and they're doing this, like this idea of this being some gigantic thing that you can never achieve. And it's just breaking that mental barrier too, right? And just getting in. Like, do you agree with this, Marina? Have you faced any of these? Like, like I personally have faced definitely these, like in my career, thinking, I don't know if I want to be. So I'm currently a senior manager, but like if you ask me 7-8 years ago, if I see myself as a manager, I'm like, no, that's too responsible. I don't think I have it in me to be that responsible. What if this person does not deliver? What do I tell them? I'm too nice. I just can't, whatever, right? So they feel too overwhelming at some point. Like, yeah. Anyway, would want to understand your perspective there.
Yeah, it's definitely really common, and for sure, and it makes sense. Like these are really challenging fields, and there's not even just one, but many challenging things that you have to work with on a daily basis. So yeah, it's a totally normal experience. I think some things that helped me and continue to help me is being very okay with being a beginner, like at whatever I'm doing. Like I don't feel shame if I don't know something yet.
Yeah.
It's like, it's fine. I think it's because I'm confident that I'll be able to learn it, because I'm like, well, historically I've always figured it out at one point. So it's just a matter of time. If I keep at this, it'll probably work out. So it's fine if I don't know it right now. And then also remembering that this is a very universal, I would say almost probably pretty universal feeling, right? So even the people that you look up to have had this experience of kind of this imposter syndrome or whatever the case may be. And then also just remembering that you're seeing most people's highlight reel. So you're not seeing all the time that I'm sitting on, at my desk, like I can't figure out this bug, and then it's something really obvious or whatever the case may be, or like how long it took me to grasp some concept that maybe for you was super easy and maybe it was, like extra challenging for whatever background reason. So yeah, just kind of keep those things in mind. And then the last thing is I would remind people who are not currently working for like a dream company, or maybe they're just trying to enter the field in general, that it can seem like everybody who works at these companies is like a super genius, but I'm not trying to disparage anyone. Everyone is talented, but it's not all super geniuses. It's a lot of normal people just trying their best, and we're just trying to figure things out as we go. So don't feel like, oh my God, I could never work at Google. Like you probably could if you worked on it for a really long time and you hustle and you're okay with being a beginner and you just stick it out. Over time, you will gain those skills that will get you to where you want to be.
I think the whole okay with being a beginner, okay to fail is so darn important. It's the most, people talk about it, but I think it's the most biggest underrated skill. Even as like a CEO of a company, you want to be okay with, being bad at something and just, because that's when you'll be open to learn, right?
Yeah. Do you guys watch Adventure Time?
A little bit.
Watch the show?
Yeah.
For our audience who watches Adventure Time, there's this character, Jake the dog, and he has this quote that I like that says, that's sucking at something is the first step towards being sort of good at something. And
I love that.
So I do like these stupid ultra run things, and that's like that's like one of the mantras I do when I'm like training on like hills or something, and I just hate it and I like cannot do it. And I'm like, the only way I'm going to be able to do this is if I do it right now, and then I do it like a bunch more times, and it's going to suck. And then it'll be okay later.
It's not a crazy ultraman. This guy runs 100 miles. I mean, yeah, it's just amazing that how Sean does this while doing this Was that a fake cough or was that a real cough? I'm kidding.
No, my lungs are messed up from when I did this
Like you're being
weekend,
humble.
actually.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, but I don't know. That's like a totally different aspect of my life, but it is like definitely it's all just like small baby steps, and think of like
Yes.
the stuff that's in front of you and be okay with like not being the fastest for this person out there, and then like suddenly eventually you'll be like, oh, I'm like, dang, I just like did that. Like things that seemed impossible are definitely possible.
Also, going back to the topic, Marina, how do you think about breadth versus depth, right? Because machine learning could be really, the breadth recommendation systems, like whatnot, you could do anything, right? Now with AI, like you could think about building agentic something, right? You could choose anything and you could just go in depth in it, or you could basically have a lot of breadth. What did you do actually when you wanted to learn? And what do you think would be a good approach right now?
So I think when it comes to foundations, breadth, you have to be able to know like in machine learning, you would need to know everything you need to be able to deploy a scalable system. And that's quite a lot of stuff. But then what you're actually deploying is where you can get really narrow, right? So I think that as a beginner, being really exploratory and just curious about stuff is great. And then at one point, once you maybe identify a particular focus area, it can be very beneficial for your career to dive deep into that area. So I think strategically, that's probably the best approach. And then sprinkle in time for curiosity as you go still. So I think it's totally legit to be 90% on recommendation systems and 10% on CV, and just like, explore a little bit from time to time, so you don't get bored. And you might also learn things you can apply to your main focus area. But that would probably be how I would recommend approaching it.
I love that. So basically, get as much foundational stuff, breadth as much as possible, especially because you're starting out. You could start anywhere. And as soon as you choose one or two areas, then go depth first, probably. And you'll probably know what the depth first is once you figure out the breadth and, go through that.
Yeah.
Right? And you'll have a choice of your own and you'll have an opinion. And probably that's the time that you start doing the depth. So do not think about depth from the get-go, basically. Because I think that's what overwhelms people too. When you probably see so many areas and so many things, I can't be as good as that person in recommendation systems or whatever, right? So you don't have to be that from the start.
Yeah. That makes sense. You have to be able to get something out there. It's kind of like the MVP thing, right? Like if you have like a really good thing, but it's only 80% of the way there, and that last 20% is like doing it in production and in people's hands, then it's basically zero because no one can use it.
Yeah.
But you can have something that's like kind of mid, but it's like fully, deployable, and then now you actually do have something to iterate on.
Can we list the things in the breadth, Marina, or would it be too much? Just to understand, like, probably might not be at the like a V2 level, but at the V0 and the V1, like, 0 and more first levels.
For machine learning, I would say Python, SQL will come up more than you think. Basic statistics, basic calculus, and linear algebra, even if that's just intuition, would be fine. Like, I don't think you need to spend a ton of time solving problems by hand, but having enough intuition to understand gradient descent would be good. And then machine learning theory, like your standard traditional machine learning, like gradient boosting and versus regression models, like that kind of thing. Metrics and evaluation. And then that's basically everything you would need to start deploying something in like a notebook, right? And then after that, you can start learning, if you don't have a software engineering background, like the software engineering fundamentals that you would need to actually be able to put something in production. And then the ML ops things that you need. So that's a whole nother world.
Yes.
But then you're basically, learning everything you need to take your notebook and your kind of like theory-based machine learning model and put it into the real world. So that's at a very high level.
That's awesome. Do you suggest, like, from courses, let's say, what are your top courses that you think we would suggest? Deep learning or machine learning for math? Like, start with math first and then machine learning? Like, any suggestions there?
Yeah, I actually think so my controversial opinion is I would start with machine learning and then go back to the math.
Okay.
Because for math, for a lot of people, math is overwhelming and boring. And so then they, say you take the Imperial College London Math for Machine Learning specialization on Coursera because you think, okay, I want to be a machine learning engineer. I'm going to need all this math. You get through the first course and you're like, oh my God, I can't do this. And so then you quit machine learning. But the reality is you're never going to be like doing these calculations by hand. And it's really more about the intuition. So I would start with the machine learning theory and then go back and learn about the nitty gritty, what's actually happening under the hood once you've developed some love for it. You know, unless you're someone who loves math, in which case go for it, knock yourself out. But like if you've been out of school for a long time, or maybe you're not super confident with math, it can be, I think a lot of people like don't end up doing machine learning because they get scared of the math early on. And the reality is most of us are not using it beyond an intuition on a day-to-day at all. I think that the math for machine learning specialization on Coursera, oh, excuse me, I lied. The machine learning specialization on Coursera still holds up.
Okay.
For math, I would just do like 3 blue, 1 brown, like essence of linear algebra and essence of calculus, because you get a visual representation and that can be good enough to start. The deep learning specialization is also good. And I would say in our AI world, that's probably worth checking out. And then at that point, I would recommend the book Software Engineering for Data Scientists and Designing Machine Learning Systems.
That's awesome.
So those 2 books. And then AI Engineering, if you're interested in that, is another book.
Nice. So when you say books, do you mind giving the author some, or really like the publisher, so that it gets easier? Or maybe you can send us
one right here.
Straight.
Look at that.
Yep,
oh yeah,
that's the one. Yeah, so AI Engineering and Designing Machine Learning Systems are both O'Reilly books by Chip Huyen. And then Software Engineering for Data Scientists. Let me look up the author. I don't know. I should know. It's another O'Reilly book.
Fun fact, I met Chip Huyen yesterday at one of the Data Connect conferences. It was pretty awesome. She's amazing. So yeah.
Nice. Just the author here for the Software Engineering for Data Scientists book is Catherine Nelson.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Look at that, all women authors.
That's true.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's really amazing. Nice. Cool. So I think we got the roadmap right here then, right? So there's Python and statistics though. Do you suggest anything for Python and statistics?
Python?
Let's say these people are not into coding at all.
What's your take on R versus Python? Let's go deep into that.
Yeah, for machine learning, definitely Python. Yeah, it's not even close.
What about web development?
Funny, I started with R, so I am partial to R, but I don't use it anymore.
Yeah, that'll need another podcast, Sean. Like, I think Sean's thing is about getting a big set of people and doing a debate and having this big discussion around Python versus R.
I think Python won it out in the end.
Yeah, unless you're doing like academic work, then R is still the winner, but that's about it.
I held on to R for a while. Probably because, like, did you learn it in your public policy program? Yeah, same. But eventually I was forced to switch to Python because not enough people I worked with knew R anymore.
Yep.
But honestly, I mean, I know Python's great. That was many years ago.
Was it SAS, Sean? I remember your joke. Was it SAS versus Python or SAS versus R?
Yeah. I mean, SAS is the one.
I was talking about that when I said I remember one of his memes got viral on LinkedIn about a joke around. Well, it was SAS, right? It was about SAS.
Because SAS like costs like $10,000 for a license per person. It's like insane. Awesome. And I mean, they just have these like government contracts mostly, and I think a lot of finance and health uses them. And their whole thing is like they won't use open source because they don't think it's safe. And it's like, I mean, as SaaS like comes with like customer support or something that can like help you figure things out. And they have always like these legacy models.
Yeah, that'll need. I mean, almost Python, I think, won the game fully in all these languages. Yeah.
But there's still, I mean, there's also just like so much legacy code that's like built in SaaS. So there's like a lot of consulting companies will have like, this person's just like job, they know SaaS and they can like go into like these big companies where whoever built those models decades ago like is long gone.
Awesome. So Marina, going back to the question, Python. So do you have any suggestions for Python and statistics?
Yeah, I think when you're just getting started with Python, just something like DataCamp. It's really good.
Yeah,
just kind of like
it's really good. Yes.
Yeah, basically like playing games. So I think that's a good way to get started. And then for statistics, if you are going for machine learning and not data science, so you don't need as much statistics, I think the math for machine learning, deep learning.ai specialization, not the Imperial College London one on Coursera, is also really good.
Mm-hmm.
That also has linear algebra and calculus, but they have a course on probability and statistics. It's very high level, but it's enough to like
Get into ML.
get going. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. These are amazing. So thank you so much, Marina. I think if there's any advice that you'd like to give for people who are starting out or just stuck somewhere, what is that you'd give? Probably also maybe something when you coach people, what do you see as like a common question? And, if you'd like to answer all, like not just the mentees that you mentored, but all these people that are going to watch this episode, what would that be?
Yeah, there's a couple things, but I would say, don't be intimidated. Don't let fear that you can't do it stop you from getting started. And then just be consistent. So just a little bit every day is going to add up to something pretty substantial over time. And as you're going, don't forget to actually build stuff. So I think, that kind of summarizes it.
Great advice.
This is awesome. Probably, Sean, do you want to ask something? Or
I think one question we ask a lot of people, and I think, we've covered a lot of stuff here already, but is there what do you think is kind of the number one underrated skill or focus area? Things that aren't something that isn't obvious, that often goes overlooked.
Yeah, for sure. Communication.
Nice.
Yeah. So
I think communication is the most popular, underrated answer. I think.
Funny.
Right?
I think we're like 30 for 30 on communication.
Nice. Well, I guess the answer is clear.
I was like, let's see if she says it.
Yep. Yeah, no, for sure. It's the biggest thing that I find separates the mentees who do really well really quickly and the ones who struggle, is like, how they're able to present themselves in interviews, how they're able to present themselves when they're networking, how much they can kind of sell their value or, negotiate things on the job. So I think it would definitely be that.
Yeah, not just getting in, but also like thriving in wherever you are, right? And even with AI now, ensuring that you ask right questions, communicate right things is even more important, right? Mm-hmm. Because especially if AI is going to take care of the technical stuff, what are humans doing? Communicating.
Yeah,
so sure. Just get better at it. Probably is the only choice we have. Yeah. Did we cover AI questions actually? Because we did cover AI as part of it. Anything about AI? How do you feel, Marina, about AI? Like, do you feel optimistic? Do you feel pessimistic, or somewhere in between?
Yeah, completely in between actually, because I can see a world that's really, really bad and I can see a world that's really, really good. And in my mind, it's basically a coin toss at this point about whether it's going to be one or the other. So I would say I'm generally pretty optimistic, so I'm just going to default to that because being scared of a future that I wouldn't be able to control anyway doesn't help me, right? Like there's nothing I can do. So if there's a super intelligence that wants to nanobot us, that's it. Like I'm out. So there's not anything I can do. So I might as well kind of just take the optimistic view of it, be like, because there legitimately are so many things that could be really, really, really cool if this works out. So let's just go with optimistic, but we'll see.
That's just awesome. I think we had a wonderful time. Any last notes, or Sean, before we close today?
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I like the optimistic view. I feel like I'm the same way. I'm kind of just like, sometimes I'll get scared and I'm just like, it's going to happen. Like, no matter what, like people aren't taking their foot off the gas. So best you can do is like, try and put some guardrails around it and then like embrace it.
For sure.
Better be on the other side. If it's going to control things, better be on the controller side, right? At least do some part of the controlling with it. So thank you so much, Marina. This was just a wonderful conversation. It's been a while. We had a chat about people getting into the industry and discussing ML specific workflows, and really appreciate you going through that with us. And for everyone who's watching, please subscribe to Data Neighbor, and also check out Marina. We're going to have her YouTube channel and her blog and all the details there. And if you have any questions for her, please drop a comment. And thank you, Marina.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks.